There was a peculiar rhythm to the voices in my mother's kitchen that morning, one that began like a gentle simmer but soon boiled over in mockery. My sister Lucia started it, flicking powdered sugar from her sleeve, wrinkling her nose at the tray of pastelitos cooling on the counter. Our cousin Marcos followed, pushing in from the breezy patio with his voice raised, corralling the older uncles. My parents hovered by the window, quiet but wide-eyed, and I stood in my chef's whites clutching a platter of fruit tarts, sharp scent of orange peel mixing with the bitter churn in my stomach. "It's not that we don't like them, Andres," Lucia said too loudly, winking at the uncles, "but you must see this is childish. You're a man, what will you do, bake cakes for tourists in Plaza Mayor? Wear an apron and ask senoras if they want more cinnamon on their churros." Laughter tore through the kitchen. The tia with the blue dress covered her mouth, but even she was smiling, except for my mother. She only watched, her hands worrying a dish towel. My father's gaze, flat, unreadable, was tethered to the window's light. Marcos leaned in, plucking one of the tarts and inspecting it as if it might bite. "This one, it's pretty, she." "But are you going to pay Madrid rent with pretty? This is not art, primo. You drew pictures as a boy, now you decorate cookies. Bar, you should come to the garage. You could make real money with us. Or study accounting, something normal." Someone else muttered, "A real job, carajo." Intellectually, I was prepared for resistance. It was one thing to fantasize, rolling dough in secret after midnight shifts hauling furniture. Another to declare 12 years after leaving school that I wanted to open a patisserie in Madrid, that my dream was to layer cream in millefeuille, not cement on brick walls. In my fantasy, I held my ground boldly, delivered an impassioned speech and swayed them, but reality left me tongue-tied, eyes scalded and cheeks burning. Even the aroma, a harmony of sugar and flaky pastry, couldn't mask that familiar feeling. I was the joke again, the child with a fanciful wish. It was my mother who finally cleared her throat and suggested we have coffee, and as she moved to the kettle she brushed her fingertips against mine in comfort, brief as a breath. I wanted to dissolve into flour and dust, vanish beneath the laughter, but shame is an odd fire. It shrank me, then it fueled me, slow, painful, but certain. That night I packed my apron, rolling pin and recipe book into a satchel and left before dawn. I landed my first job at a tiny panaderia near Retiro Park, wiping tables and slicing baguettes. I kept my ambitions quiet. Madrid was loud enough without another voice making promises. It was an austere time. I lived in a grimy attic room, no stove, just a kettle and a window that opened onto a rooftop garden tended by a Polish artist who liked to paint pigeons. At night, while the city below buzzed with laughter and cheap wine, I practiced making choux pastry by candlelight. My hands ached. My mind did too, every time my uncle's voice echoed, "Are you going to pay Madrid rent with pretty?" I failed again and again. Learned that the difference between dough and disaster was sometimes nothing more than the weather or a half-second distraction. My first batch of eclairs collapsed. The next were better, but filled with undercooked custard. Raw flour taste lingering in my mouth, a physical reminder of humiliation. But I remembered my grandmother humming while she braided strudel, never cursing the dough for refusing to rise, only trying again, patient and persistent. During scraps of free time, I trailed chefs I admired, feigning delivery errands so I could peek into bustling hotel kitchens, memorizing gestures, how to hold a piping bag, how to strike a balance between delicate and decadent. I scribbled notes, I sketched flavor combinations on napkins. There were moments of grace, a perfect glaze, a crisp bite, a neighbor smiling as she tasted my orange and pistachio tart. Small victories that nobody back home cared about. 3 years slipped by. The bakery's owner, Senora Delgado, took a liking to my stubbornness. She let me develop new fillings, and when she was ill, she let me run the counter. Word began to spread slowly, gently, that you could get a pastry here like nowhere else in Salamanca district, seasonal and strange. Fig jam, peppercorn meringues, olive oil and honey layered so you could taste the fields at harvest. People lingered at the window, eager for whatever the boy from Extremadura would dream up next. One stormy Wednesday, a chef in a heavy apron came to buy a box of financiers. He introduced himself as Jean-Louis, head patissier at a newly opened hotel. He chewed, considering, and then, "Come stage with me, you might have hands for bigger things." His Spanish was awkward, but his smile was sincere. My heart leapfrogged every doubt. The Hotel La Traviata was a different world. Steel-prepped tables, industrial lights, walls gleaming with copper pots. I was an ant in a city of giants. There was shouting in 6 languages, flames leaping and knives flashing. My first month, I peeled carrots and stacked dishes, not once touching a pastry bag. The other chefs eyed me warily. Country boy, they muttered, too soft for real work. I missed the quiet of the bakery, the gentle hum of the streets outside my attic window. I worked twice as hard, bled from my palms, washed 10,000 spoons. I learned to endure, and slowly the city gave back. I watched and learned. I memorized how chocolate whispers when it's tempered correctly. I noticed the weight of egg whites at precisely the right peak. I practiced patience, enough to stand there, wrists aching, pouring caramel in golden sheets until the aroma lifted me somewhere else. Back to my mother's kitchen, to the days when I dreamed without permission. After 2 years, Chef Jean-Louis, a man who almost never praised anyone, caught me working late, redoing an entire tray of canelés because the crust wasn't quite right. He tasted one, nodded. "You care," he said, "you have taste. Open your own shop one day. Madrid needs more dreamers who do, not just talk." He handed me a torn slip of paper, an address, a number, and the name of an old woman who, he said, owned a derelict storefront in Chueca. "If you save, take risk, call her." It took another 4 years. Patience is a muscle and mine ached every day. I put aside money, every tip, every overtime hour. I lived frugally. No nights out, no new shoes. My only luxury was flour, eggs, sugar, cream. I drew plans, sketched ads, practiced recipes so often that my hands moved of their own accord. At first, nobody came. My sign, a clever swirl of Andres in gold leaf, hung lonely above a narrow green door. The landlord, Doña Remedios, shook her head at my foolishness but let me pay her in installments. I made madeleines and financiers and a tart laced with rosewater and almond, set them on glazed plates in the window and waited. I stayed up late folding dough, sometimes with that old shame flaring. Was my family right? Was I still the child with a ridiculous hope? At night the laughter returned, echoing off cold marble floors. But every morning I opened the shop. A Japanese tourist wandered in, quietly buying boxes for her friends. A local theatre actor tasted my lemon tarts and returned with his whole troupe. The shop blossomed, not suddenly but like spring. One day you realize every table is full and the windows fogged with laughter. The critics came, called my shop an oasis of poetry and butter. Metro Weekly voted my almond croissants best in Madrid. Someone Instagrammed my cakes, and then everyone came. The shame faded, never gone but softened, like the bittersweet note at the end of a good ganache. 7 years after that first mockery in my mother's kitchen, I received a message on Facebook. It was my sister Lucia, now married and a mother herself. "Papa's birthday big party at Abuela's, you're invited. Will you bring pastry?" All Lucia's idea, smirking face. "Will everyone be there?" I typed. "To-dos, even Marcos." He told me to order roscones from that new shop in Chueca but didn't realize it's yours. Ha ha ha, come hermano, show off. I said yes. I slept badly the night before, nerves jangling. I was not the scolded boy any longer, but to return home is to revisit every old bruise in the heart. That morning I loaded bright boxes, tied with green ribbon, into a taxi, each layer carefully packed. Praline cream puffs, fruit tarts agleam with apricot, delicate macarons dusted with gold. Spring had come early to Extremadura, and the fields on the approach to my family's village were streaked with wildflowers. My grandmother's whitewashed house looked smaller than I remembered, the kitchen window thrown open so I could smell the herbs in her garden. As I stepped in, apron crisp and face freshly shaven, the laughter paused. Lucia's little daughter Adriana ran to hug me, the others stood blinking almost as though they didn't recognize me. Lucia came forward, hug fierce as ever. "You smell better than the bakery, Andres," she teased, eyes shining. "No flour on my face today," I joked, and her laughter set the others at ease. I caught my father's gaze. He stepped forward, awkward but earnest, and clapped my shoulder. "You look strong, Hijo." "I brought a little something," I said, voice trembling in spite of myself. We gathered in the shaded backyard where a long table was set for 50. Uncles and cousins hovered, lips pursed, some hiding their skepticism better than others. Marcos lounged across from me, smirking. "Best in Madrid, eh? Lucia says your shop is in a magazine." I didn't reply. Instead, I began to open the pastry boxes, slow and deliberate, each layer an offering. First the canelés, gleaming brown and fragrant with rum, then featherlight strawberry mille-feuille, sharp red slices against blonde pastry. Pistachio croissants still warm, my mother gasped at the rainbow of macarons lined up like jewels. Uncle Eduardo reached for a tart, stopped, and instead waited. He never waited for food. Each face watched, curious now, no jokes. I poured coffee, I set each plate myself with a trembling hand. For a long, suspended minute nobody spoke. Even the birds seemed to hush, all attention on my family, on the pieces of my dream, crafted by lonely nights and unyielding doubt. Lucia was first, taking a bite of a cherry tartlet. Her eyes fluttered closed and she laughed, but not cruelly. Ay Dios, what is this? Marcos tried the pistachio quasar, tore a piece away. He chewed, swallowing slowly. Better than Café Goya, he said at last, voice a shade too quiet for bravado. The uncles murmured in approval, crumbling flaky crust between their fingers. My mother, eyes wet, reached for my hand across the table. But it was my father who, after his first bite, an almond pastry, the same kind my grandmother once made, put down his fork and looked at me long and hard. "You made these?" he asked. Somehow the question mattered more than any review or Instagram post. "I did, in my own shop, in Chueca." He nodded, old pride and regret colliding in his eyes. "We were wrong," he said softly. "I was afraid for you. I didn't understand." I let out a breath I'd been holding for years. Conversation flowed then, voices lightening. Everyone wanted seconds, then thirds. Neighbors drifted in, drawn by the scent and the laughter. Someone produced a copy of the newspaper featuring my shop, a younger me grinning, arms folded in a busy kitchen, and passed it around, pride swelling in their words. Even Marcos produced his phone to show a blurry photo of my storefront, bragging that he, in fact, had always believed in me, if only in secret. Hours passed, the table covered in crumbs and sunlight. Old doubts fell away, washed clean by the living proof in every bite, the laughter and the warm, sticky hands of nieces and nephews sneaking macarons. For years I had measured success in silence and solitude, but here, now, I saw it clearly, not just in praise but in return, full circle among those who once doubted. As twilight fell and candles flickered on the old table, I stood to leave. My mother hugged me fiercely. My sister pressed a box of biscuits into my hand for the journey. My father pulled me into a rough embrace, whispering, "Bring your daughter next time. We'll save you the best seat." I walked back toward the car, the familiar paths of my village bathed in evening gold. I felt not only absolved but expanded, my courage burnished and brighter than before. The shame that once consumed me was transformed, tempered as sugar becomes caramel, not vanished but made into something rich and meaningful. Success was sweet, but it was the return that tasted at last like home.